But my name is Charlotte, for those of you who are joining after the introduction. My pronouns are she and her, and I lead the talent acquisition function at Opencare. We're a little health tech startup in Toronto, and we're a digital platform that is aimed at changing the way that people interact with healthcare. And we are starting by overhauling the dental industry. So as Alex mentioned, I did start my career on the agency side, actually, in executive search. And then I was hired as Opencare's first ever talent sourcer. So built out the strategic sourcing function there. We were 38 people at the time. And over the last 2 years, we have more than doubled in size. And about 40% of the people that we've added to our business were sourced and headhunted. So, I started to take on full cycle recruiting about a year ago. And then today I do lead a small team of talent acquisition professionals. So thank you, Alex. Thank you, Jesse, and the entire conference team. It's an honor to be sharing the stage with some really talented folks today. So thanks for having me. And this is what we're going to go over today. So one, we're going to understand why a sourcing strategy is important and how to leverage data to make more proactive and well-informed decisions. We're going to learn how to build a custom sourcing strategy from scratch. And then I'm also going to tell you the story of how we achieved unprecedented scale of our sales team at Opencare in record time. So the first thing I want to talk about is talent sourcing as a strategic function. When we take a look at the recruiting cycle, recruiters are typically responsible for taking candidates all the way from attraction and engagement, all the way through the interview process, and then to offer, and even sometimes into onboarding. Talent sourcing is focused specifically on the first part of the cycle. So this is the part where I live, and this is the part where I like to nerd out quite a bit. Talent sourcing is often considered an entry-level role, a stepping stone to full-cycle recruitment. Sourcers are often seen as a nice-to-have on a talent team, but not as a must-have. And what it really is the secret sauce. And if it's done right, talent sourcing, as its own strategic function within talent, can add a ton of value. It's a craft that requires a specialized skill set, and you can drive way more effective outcomes for your talent function as a whole, for your business, and it can help you manage your stakeholders better. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So if you are struggling to get talent acquisition a seat at the table, taking a sourcing first approach is going to get you that buy-in that you need. It's going to keep your stakeholders better informed and then more bought in. So you're giving them better insights into potential roadblocks, market changes, timelines for hiring, available talent, and you're avoiding unicorn or purple squirrel situations, which I know keeps all of us recruiters up at night. You're really coming to your conversation with your hiring managers, your stakeholders, with key data to help have those more informed conversations around what actually is available in the market, and avoiding those unrealistic laundry lists of expectations, and just really working with your hiring managers to drill down into the core competencies of what you're looking for. You can make proactive and informed decisions, much better decisions with a strategic sourcing function. You'll reduce your time to hire. You're going to build a diverse pipeline with multiple perspectives and diverse sets of experience. You're going to get more out of your pipeline. It's going to help you increase your competitive edge. It's obviously a very tight market out there, and you want to get ahead of the curve in any way that you can. So by having a strategic sourcing function, you are going to beat the crowd to the best talent. And you're going to transform your talent function from a service to a strategic business builder. So as opposed to, a talent function that is a service to just put butts in seats, you can actually solve business problems by identifying the right people to bring into the org. And so what is a sourcing strategy? So really what it is a strategic allocation of time, resources, and effort across various candidate channels to build a pool of talent to then go through your interview process. So there's a couple cornerstones of a solid sourcing strategy. The first being it needs to be grounded in data, specifically historical hiring data. The other piece is that it is dependent on a consistent and a repeatable hiring process. So what this does is it creates consistency and reliability in the data that you are gathering. It helps you understand how your candidates are moving through your hiring cycle. And ultimately, it helps you make more proactive choices at the top of your search to then improve those outcomes later in the funnel. And so why would we go through all of this effort in building a sourcing function and a sourcing strategy? Essentially what you're doing is you're using data to save you time, you're working smarter, and you're driving more results. So if we know what we need to do at our top of funnel at the outset of our search to make a hire, we know what channels work best for each team, for each type of role, we can get more out of our pipeline and we can save time to then put into other searches that we're working on or other projects or drinking margaritas or whatever it is that you want to do with your extra time. I'm not going to judge you. But essentially by having this knowledge up front, you can map out all your searches, you're setting better timelines, you're breaking down, what stage of your search you should be in on a week-by-week basis. And that way you can set clearer project milestones for yourself and better manage your stakeholders, whether you're in-house or whether you're on the agency side. And this efficiency is going to cut your time to hire significantly. By knowing what works best for each team or each role type, you can make more hires with less effort, which I'm a big fan of because I'm lazy by nature. So one of the things that I do want to talk about is data. We often think of data as a scary concept. We have these KPIs and these metrics, and we see it as this number that we're just constantly competing against just to measure our performance. And that is intimidating. But in reality, it's not actually that scary. What we want to do is we want to change the way that we think about data. And so I want you to think about it this way. We should be using data as a proactive diagnostic tool as opposed to just a performance measure. So this means using data to get ahead of potential roadblocks in your search. You can identify and avoid issues ahead of time instead of just using data to measure how your search went after the fact, right? And you're using data as a tool for proactive decision making. It's going to save you time, you're going to work smarter, and you're going to drive more results with less effort. Now, something to note about data is that it is a great tool, but it is just that. It's a tool. It's one of the many that you have available to you. It's not always going to show you the full picture. It's not always going to give you all the right answers. The value that you're bringing to the table as a talent professional is to analyze that data, add context, and then make an informed decision. So now that we've got all those disclaimers out of the way, I wanted to talk to you about the first key concept, and this is the concept of a funnel. This is something that some of you might be familiar with, others not. I first learned about this concept in the middle of my interview for my role at Opencare. My now manager, Mike, got up to the whiteboard, physically drew a funnel and explained the concept to me, which was embarrassing at the time, but I'm very thankful for it now. And the interview question that he had asked me, actually, that had prompted him explaining this to me, was, how do you know how many messages you need to send out to make a hire? And then how do you know when to stop? And at the time, my answer was, you stop when you make a hire. And it turns out there's actually a better way, and I'm going to teach you. And so brace yourselves, there's a little bit of math in this part, but it's really not complicated. So this is your funnel. And at the top, you have all of your candidates from applicants, outbound, referrals. And as we go through the stages of the interview process, candidates fall off and we eventually end up with the person that we hire at the bottom of the funnel. And so the magic lies in understanding how people are moving through the funnel. It helps us determine how much work we need to do at the top, statistically, to end up with a hire at the bottom, right? So that way, again, we know how much work we need to do ahead of time. We can better prioritize. And what we have to do to understand how people are moving through the interview process is we have to understand the conversion rates between each stage. So some of you are going to be able to do this and gather this data within the reporting function of your applicant tracking system. Others may need to build a spreadsheet, or if you're on the agency side, you're going to want to get these numbers from your client. If you're taking this level of detail and paying this much attention and showing your clients that, they're going to want to work with you again, trust me. So at the top, we have all of our candidates, right? From inbound, outbound, whatever channels you find your candidates through. The number of stages in your interview process is not going to change the math. It depends on like the organization you're working for or working with, but it doesn't change the math, so don't worry about that. And for the sake of this example, we're going to keep it pretty simple with just a few interviews. And your conversion rate is a calculation of how many people from the previous stage made it to the current stage in the process. And you're going to want to calculate the conversion as a percent, and all it takes is simple division and multiplication. So you want to take the number of candidates that made it to the current stage and divide it by the number of candidates that were in the previous stage, and then multiply by 100 to get a percent. So for example, let's say you go through all of your historical hiring data, you've broken down how many candidates have passed through each stage of the interview process, and these are the numbers that you get. So you can calculate this for all roles, all time. You can do it for one specific role. You can do it for a set of roles for a specific team even. And then later, we're going to learn how to use the same concept to understand conversion on a channel by channel basis, right? So applicants, inbounds, referrals, so that we figure out which ones perform better and use this as the base to build our sourcing strategy. So for example, we want to know out of everyone that we reach out to, everyone that applies, how many of those candidates are actually qualified and interested for a chat. So we want to know how many people are moving to the phone screen stage, that being the current stage, and we will divide that number by the total top of funnel number in the previous stage. So for example here, 25 candidates divided by 100 candidates times 100, and that's a 25% conversion. So of all the people that we reach out to, 25% respond positively and they move to a phone screen. So just a quick note, your current stage and your previous stage in that equation there don't have to be back to back. So you can do that same calculation for your total funnel, from phone screen to interview number 2, from interview number 1 to hire. And if we want to know how many people we need to put in the top of our funnel to make a hire, we can calculate the conversion from total outreach, so everything at the top, to the one person that we hire at the bottom, or multiples that we hire at the bottom. So what are we doing with all this information, right? Because it's a lot. The first thing that you're going to want to do is track and calculate your overall conversion for all roles and all times. So this is your baseline. And this is a really important step to take by default, because then you have a baseline to compare everything else to, and you understand the performance of different teams and different channels within the context of how your business, how your talent function typically performs. You can also track and calculate your overall conversion rates on a per team, per channel or per role basis, and compare that to the performance of the baseline for more informed sourcing. So it helps you understand where there might be leaks in your funnel. And then finally, another way that you can apply the conversion method is for outbound messaging. So if you want to refine your messaging and improve your conversion from outreach to phone screen or even response, you can A/B test different subject lines, different email bodies, for example, see which ones are performing better, and then use those ones that are getting you more phone screens. Because if you improve your conversion from outreach to phone screen, it means that you need to send out less messages to ultimately make the same hire. And that puts time back in your calendar. And I don't know anybody who doesn't want more time in their calendar. I sure do. So for example, right, let's say we're working on an engineering role and our baseline outreach to phone screen conversion normally for the company is 20%. So that's the overall average for all roles. So of the people that we reach out to, 20% are interested in chatting with us. And we're doing this engineering search and we realize that it's only an 8% conversion rate to phone screen from outreach. So what this does is this delta between the two is pretty big, and that indicates to us that either we need to take a look at our messaging or we need to research for any changes in the market that might be causing this drop in interest, or we just know that engineering roles have a poor top of funnel conversion, and we are just going to require more time and more resources when we are hiring for engineers because it's more of an uphill battle. And so by knowing this ahead of time, we can manage our own expectations, our stakeholders' expectations, and our workload, as well as our timelines better. So now we're going to be applying these concepts on a per channel basis to build out our sourcing strategy. So we're going to take it a step deeper, and we're going to look at each channel that we get our candidates from. So for example, applicants or headhunting or events within a specific department. So let's say we want to do this like just for sales hiring or just for engineering hiring. And the general rule when you are looking at building a sourcing strategy is you want to start high and then drill deeper. So let's break down the steps, 3 easy steps to building a sourcing strategy. The first step, identify your candidate channels, right? Where do you find your candidates? Outbound email, applicants, LinkedIn, referrals, events. Step 2, you're going to want to calculate the conversion strength for each channel. So on a per team or per role basis. So for example, if we want to build a custom sourcing strategy for all of our engineering roles, we're going to parse out the historical data for just our engineering roles. We're going to calculate the conversion rate from applicant to hire, outbound email to hire, and referral to hire, just for our historical engineering hiring data. And then from there, we're going to build our sourcing strategy for our engineering team and future searches by prioritizing the channels that work best specifically for that team. And it's going to be different from team to team. So an example, these are the channels that we use at Opencare. So we get our candidates through applicants, outbound, and referrals. Now, the channels that you choose to define can be as high level or as granular as you like. Typically, you want to index that based on the volume of hiring. So if your client is Amazon or you work for Amazon and it's really high volume, you have a little bit more wiggle room to get more specific about your channels. If you're a company like Opencare, where we hire 40 people a year, your data is going to be less skewed if you have just sort of larger, more generic channels. So the second step is to calculate the conversion strength of each channel on a per team or per role basis. So a good place to start is with all of the hires that you've ever made for that role or that team historically. and take a look, like how many of those hires that you have made over the years came from each channel? How many were applicants? How many did you have to headhunt? How many were referred in? How many came from events? And that way you're starting to get an initial look at what works specifically for that team. The next thing that you're going to do, actually just like a note, if it is a new role and you don't have a ton of historical data, you can look to the larger departments or similar roles where you have more data points, because you want to have some statistical significance. And we want to ask how much effort was actually needed at the top of funnel for each of these channels to get a hire at the bottom. That's really what we're looking to understand. And so the third step, once we have all of this information, we've done these calculations, is to prioritize the channels from strongest to weakest. So it's about prioritizing channels with the best conversion because they're more efficient. So the more efficient the channel, the less time you need to spend sourcing. And this way, what you're doing is you're building out a go-to playbook and a go-to sourcing strategy for each department or each role. And so next time you get a requisition for a role within that department, you already know what to do. You have the sourcing strategy. You understand what works best for that team. I hope that makes sense. And so you want to make sure that you are checking in and iterating on these strategies about every 6 months or so. The reason for this is the market changes. So does your business. And so it's really important for you to update your playbooks as you go along. So for example, at Opencare, our applicant channel has become far more efficient ever since COVID. Unfortunately, there are very, very talented people who lost their jobs due to the pandemic, and there is a spike in high caliber talent actively seeking roles on the market. And so these candidates are performing better at each stage throughout the interview process, and we're seeing more success with our applicants. And so we can now lean more on the applicant channel and spend less time sourcing because we're seeing an increased efficiency there. And so we're making hires faster, and we're taking advantage of those market changes. And the only way you're going to be aware of those market changes is if you have folks on your talent team who are specializing and paying attention to this stuff. So these are all the concepts that you need to build a sourcing strategy from scratch. So congrats, we made it. I did promise that I would tell you the story of how we achieved unprecedented scale of the sales team at Opencare in record time. So this actually also happens to be the story of how we applied a custom sourcing strategy for the first time to get there. So it's a contextualized example of everything that we just learned. But that was me in 2018. I was a lot less tired then. And I had just landed the role as talent sourcer #1 at Opencare. And I'd finally broken into tech, and it was about 8 months into my role, and life was really good. And that's my manager, Mike. Yes. He's on a scooter. I worked for a startup. This is what startup life is. And some changes had come upon the talent team, and unfortunately, it did leave us short one talent partner on the team, so a full cycle recruiter who happened to be in charge of sales hiring. And one day, I'm minding my own business. I'm sitting at my desk, and Mike comes up on the scooter, and he says to me, "Charlotte, we need to double the size of the sales team. We need to do it in less than 2 months, and I'm going to need you to do that. Just, you'll learn as you go. You're going to, own the whole cycle." And this, keep in mind, like, this was all of my experience up until this point in talent had been in sourcing. And so this was like, I didn't know the first thing about full cycle recruiting. So this was me in that moment. And after I was done panicking, I decided that the best approach to the problem would just be to leverage my skill set in sourcing, because frankly, they were the only skills that I had. So I started by taking a look at our historical hiring data for the sales team And then I figured, okay, let me at least figure out a sourcing strategy and then we can go from there. And so when we take a look at our original approach to sales hiring at Opencare, we used to mostly get our sales folks out of the outbound channel. So we were headhunting with cold outreach. Our average time to hire for an individual on the sales team was 58 days. And in the last 3 years, up until that point, we had made 7 hires in total to the sales team. So pretty inefficient. And then I broke down everything by channel. So I wanted to see how much effort it took to make a hire in each of those channels for sales specifically. So we had made 7 hires in the past total. I saw that 2 had come from outbound, so headhunting. 2 of them were applicants, and then 3 were referred in. And then to calculate the conversion rate for each channel, what I did was I simply took the number of hires from each channel and then divided it by the top of funnel effort for that specific channel. So I took the number of hires we made from the outbound channel, divided it by the number of messages we sent out, applicants, divided by total number of applicants, and then hired through referrals, divided by the total number of referrals. And then you get your conversion rate. So for example, the outbound channel, we had to reach out to 534 candidates to make 2 hires. So that's 267 messages outbound to make 1 hire, right? And so that conversion rate is 0.37 for that channel on that team specifically. And that's a really poor conversion. At the time, we were an immature hiring org. We've made a lot of process improvements since, and it has improved, but that's a story for another day. And what you can see here as well is that our referral channel for the sales team was actually outperforming the other 2 channels 6 times over. The conversion rate was 2.4%. And the way that we got that is we had 124 referrals, and of those 124, 3 were hired. And so you can also see that the outbound messaging channel was the least efficient for the sales team. Despite that being our least efficient channel, where we had to send out hundreds of emails just to get 1 hire, this was still the main channel that we prioritized. And this was still the thing that we spent the most time on. And that doesn't make sense because it takes so much time to send out that many messages, especially if you're trying to keep things customized. And this is often the default in sourcing, right? We assume that the outbound, messaging channel is the most effective, but talent sourcing is so much more than that. It's so much more than headhunting. The real impact and value of sourcing extends beyond that. It's about looking at the bigger picture, strategically allocating your time, your effort, and your resources. And what was unique about this was that the referral channel did well just for sales, really. Like referrals, if you take a look at our engineering roles, they don't perform as well. Headhunting, for example, is way more effective for that team. So why did referrals work for sales and it didn't work for other teams? And that's where this concept of context with data comes in, right? If you think about it, sales folks are naturally well connected, and it's a high volume space. There are so many different salespeople in the market, so many different types of salespeople, and you have to talk to a lot of people to find folks that make sense for your organization, right? Different product types and customer types and industries and sales cycles. And so good salespeople know other good salespeople, and they're privy to those nuances of their skill set. And so the candidates that were being referred in by other salespeople were a better fit for the role, and so they performed better. So our new strategy for sales, for sourcing, was put together based on those findings. So we prioritized the referral channel, and we took the time and effort that we would have spent on sending out hundreds of messages and instead used it to build out a robust referral program for this role. We involved the hiring manager. We made it a competition. We posted the role for the applicant channel to lots of different places where salespeople hung out on the internet. And we also significantly reduced the amount of messages we had to send because we optimized those other 2 channels that worked best for sales. And so in the end, we only ended up having to make 83 outbound messages to make a hire in that channel, which is way better than the 267 we had to before. And Just something really quick about referrals. People tend to refer folks that look like them or have similar experiences. And so you might actually end up with a homogenous team if you rely on that too heavily. So you want to be careful, still use other channels, no matter how well the referral channel performs. And some ways that you can reduce bias is by asking for specific sets of criteria for skills and qualifications from your referees, so that people will think twice about who they're recommending and not just recommend people that they like. So for example, for sales, we asked for specific sales cycles and client types and things like that. And we actually ended up with the most diverse team that we'd ever had in sales. And so real quick, last couple slides, because I know I'm running up on time. I'll be done in 1 minute. These are the results of changing the sourcing strategy for sales. We ended up switching the main channel from outbound to referrals. Our time to hire went from 58 days to 31 days. And we started out by only being able to make 7 hires in 3 years. We ended up making 6 hires in 4.5 weeks. And that was 3 times as many as people as we had originally set out. So we were a lot more efficient. And of those 6 hires, 3 were referred in, 2 had applied, and one was sourced. And so what we did was we increased our efficiency. We didn't, if we didn't look at the numbers proactively at the top of the search, we would have wasted a lot of time headhunting. And we ended up getting more hires out of a single pipeline. We were able to keep hiring because we just loved the talent that was coming in, and we were able to scale much more than we thought we ever could have. And by improving our ability to scale the sales team, the business was able to accelerate customer acquisition. We grew revenue faster. So we were exceeding our targets as a business. And now as a talent function, what we're doing is we're solving real business problems and we're driving impact. And so the moral of this story is sourcing is so much more than just headhunting. It's so much more than just a service to your talent function. Whether you are a full cycle recruiter, a talent sourcer, whether you're on the agency side or you're in-house, having a strategic, data-driven and sourcing first approach to talent acquisition is going to drive real impact. It's going to solve business problems, and it's going to get you and your talent function a seat at the table. And that's it. That's all my time. I went a couple minutes over. I'm sorry. If any of you have any questions at all, please do feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Charlotte Harris there. I'll drop my my LinkedIn profile into the chat as well. Happy to stick around too in this chat area to answer any questions that y'all have. But thank you so much for your time.